everyone, and thank you so much to the GovConnect conference for having us here. My colleague Martin Farley is here, and he'll be doing the second half of this talk. But yes, my name is Elizabeth Adelodun, and I'm the Green ED Project Manager at the Royal College of Emergency Medicine. And today we're going to talk about what efforts we're making at the college to ensure that emergency medicine is actually more environmentally sustainable. But before we do that, we're going to highlight the state of play of the NHS today and exactly how many challenges we are facing in terms of how we can actually implement or achieve the net zero NHS target by 2040. Also, we're going to talk about what we're doing at the college to ensure that we are more sustainable and how we're trying to move the specialty to become more environmentally secure for the future. When talking about the climate crisis, I believe it's always important to start with your whys. For me, my why is a principle I learned from my father, which is to make sure that in any professional or personal setting, I add value and I try my best to make sure that anyone that encounters me lives better than when they first met me. And I want to do the same thing with the environment. I want to contribute my part. I want to work with as many people as possible to ensure that we're playing our part and we're implementing strategies to make the environment better than how we met it, and also bringing the next generation along. We know that the climate crisis is an existential crisis. This is why we're here. And this infographic actually encompasses the many different ways that the climate crisis can impact on our health. For example, we know that the UK heat waves are rising. We know that more people over 2,500 people died in 2020. We know that air pollution also is the biggest environmental threat to health in the UK, and it claims about 1 in 20 deaths. Additionally, we are aware that ecology is directly linked to the natural environment, and the climate change crisis is negatively impacting this, and which will in turn impact on our health, except we do something as we're all aiming for. Experts agree that the climate change is the biggest challenge, is the biggest global threat challenge of the 21st century. And this is a statement that was put out by The Lancet in 2009. And unfortunately, this statement still stands true, except we do something quickly with the accelerating of decarbonization, as we all know, to avert this crisis. Now, we know the NHS's target for 2020 to achieve net zero. But before we talk about how we can actually achieve this goal, I think it's important to highlight the challenges that the NHS is facing, which is unprecedented at all areas of the NHS, with a special focus on emergency medicine. For example, we know that there's increasing demand because our population is rising, and a lot of our and in later life, we would need more of the complex medical support due to the rising population. We know that we hear about staffing shortages often because there's a strain on the service we're providing, and the available staff are then stretched thin, which is in trying to keep up with the increasing demand. We hear often about budget constraints and the mental health crisis and ambulance queues, and also the special seasonal pressures that emergency departments face. And we also know that to address these issues, we need to approach it in a multifaceted way. We know that it will be important to increase funding, to invest in recruitment and retention of staff, to be able to find innovative ways to reduce the demand on the emergency department, and also to ensure that we are finding incentives for people to be able to do more sustainability work, to be able to find a long-term strategy within the NHS to ensure that sustainability is actually prioritized. Now, in spite of all these challenges, there's good news, because a number of hospitals in the UK have actually made changes that have yielded positive outcomes. And I want to highlight a few of these. The first is at Charing Cross Hospital, where they ran a year-long campaign to increase education and awareness around reducing cannulation. And they called it Contemplate Before You Cannulate. And this actually led to a 25% decrease in the amounts of cannulation. And they were able to save 19,000 kilograms of carbon dioxide and an equivalent financial savings of 95,000 pounds, which is money that can be used for other uses in terms of, issues that the financial constraints that the department is facing or also elsewhere in the hospital. At Brighton and Gov, they actually tried to reduce the energy consumption of their computers. So what they did was to run a campaign where they changed the settings of the computers to 5 minutes sleep function, and then they also reduced the screen brightness by 50%. And this actually led to 3 tons of carbon dioxide being saved and an equivalent of over £2,000 in financial savings. Elsewhere in the country, we heard about Solihull Hospital, where they performed the world's first net zero carbon operation. Because they used reusable gowns, they were able to administer medicines through the vein, and especially general anesthetics, instead of anesthetic gases, which have a higher greenhouse effect. And then they were able to also reduce energy consumption and also only opened items that were going to be used when required. And for any single-use equipment, they were able to recycle those. And that was quite remarkable. Additionally, in Hull University Teaching Hospital, they actually are entirely run now by solar power. And this is evidence of, the amazing work they started doing in 2021 by installing solar panels in the land adjacent to the hospital. Similarly, at Great Ormond Street Hospital, they were able to reduce the use of plastic gloves, and this led to 21 tons of plastic being saved. So we see examples of small actions being taken at different sites across the different hospitals in the UK, and them having good outcomes as we would expect to help us reach that target of net zero by 2040. Now, achieving the net zero emissions target is quite critical in terms of how we want to address climate change, but it's associated also with some key challenges in the present time. For example, the short-term focus, and we can understand why many leaders will prioritize, immediate issues like public health crises and also social issues over long-term sustainability goals. We also know that there are political and policy challenges around the short-term tenures that politicians have and also policymakers, and that can actually impact their decision-making in terms of whether to, invest in a project that will have long-term benefits or actually one that will give immediate benefits. Additionally, not many people are aware, or some lack awareness in terms of the urgency of the climate crisis, and that might be met with resistance when it comes to implementing actions and whether to prioritize long-term sustainability over short-term pressing challenges. We also heard earlier on about the social equity concerns that many will argue will be exacerbated if we actually don't carefully and thoroughly pay attention to the changes we're making, and will just make life harder for people who are already having difficulties and challenging in their social spaces. And as humans, change is often difficult, but for us to achieve the net zero targets, we know that we will need to make significant changes to be able to change the way we actually operate on a day-to-day basis with a long-term focus on achieving these net zero targets. Nevertheless, we know that there are ways to address these challenges. Some of them would be around increasing awareness and education around the benefits of sustainability and also the importance of prioritizing climate action now. Financial incentives would be great as well, because then it just takes away the challenge of finding the resources to be able to afford to take part in these many green initiatives, and also to make it easier for leaders within hospitals and EDs to take part in achieving the net zero targets. We also know that without leadership, nothing happens. So we know that it's essential for us to have leadership buy-in from both clinical and non-clinical leaders to be able to ensure that the priority is communicated and that people are actually supported in implementing these actions. And we know that without cooperation, we can only do so much. And so we would really we know that also that encouraging collaboration on a local and national level will be essential to achieving our goals. I now want to quickly talk about what we're doing at the college to ensure that we're more sustainable in terms of, our own operations, and also how we're going to make the specialty more sustainable in the long term. So the first thing we did was that in 2019, we declared a climate emergency, and we divested from fossil fuels. We also implemented a series of incentives to ensure that we were more sustainable. For example, we have zero waste to landfill. We also set up an environmental specialist interest group, which is a committee that actually has remits in terms of education and awareness around environmental issues within the college and the specialty. We also, promote recycling, and we only work with suppliers who source their material from ethical ways. So that's some of the things we're doing, and from this committee, we were able to set up the Green ED project, which we piloted in 2022, and my colleague Martin will tell us more about that.
Thank you. I'll just quickly introduce this program, and I think it's a good segue to talk about some of the great case studies that we saw just there. There was all this great action going on at different A&Es, and some of the case studies mentioned, and we were thinking about how to tie some of this together into sort of a central vehicle, and that's where we kind of came up with Green ED. The idea being to sort of standardize all the good practice that we could do within A&E environments. And we're very proud of the name Green as well. Yes, Green ED. But the idea essentially was, yes, to bring together all these good topics. And I like the analogy of health and safety standards, which we have. Everybody follows health and safety. Why not create standards around environmental sustainability as well? So we piloted the program in the sites that you see here. Yes, some of these great sites from around the UK. And some of the things that we were looking at was just having set actions, providing some set guidance, because actually it was one thing to set an action, another thing was to tell people how to do it. People were really seeking guidance on how to implement some of these steps that we put within this framework. And then we did try to quantify some of these actions, and we really wanted to communicate these things to other A&Es as well. And the other thought was that we wanted to build on this over time. So what we have today in the framework is not going to remain idle. The idea is that we build on it. So you see some of the case studies. Hannah Webb was on one of them. She's working on another case study right now about reusable suture packs, which is a great case study. And if she can get some success there, then we'd love for that to become a criteria, an action in the future. So the Green ED program is split. It has 3 different levels: bronze, silver, gold, to keep it nice and simple. And the idea, of course, is to provide some evidence-based interactions. And it's really to complement all the stuff that we've heard about today. It's really focused, of course, on the A&E environments. And we wanted to also provide some calculators so people could try to estimate some of the good stuff that they're doing. Because often some of the actions that you take help save money, they save carbon. So if we can tell people about those figures, it can help motivate them to do more and, of course, gain some more support from the higher-ups. If you're wondering what we're asking people to do, these are some of the bronze actions that you can see, and you can find this on the Green ED website, which is on RChem. And I won't go through these now, but encourage you to take a look if you're interested. And there's another infographic which talks about what else we're doing at the different levels of the framework. The framework is hosted online, so there's a portal, which of course is hosted on the RChem website. And we did, after the pilot, this was launched, Elizabeth launched this earlier this year. And the idea is to get this out to as many A&Es as possible, so they can sign up, register, and go through the actions and get recognition for the good stuff that they've done. Some of the benefits are things that you've seen here. We had to mention financial savings, but of course carbon savings was the real focus. But it also translates over to patient experience and training and management opportunities, and as well as recognition for some of the consultants and doctors that have been taking part in the program. And of course, it aligns with everything we're working on today. So that's almost it for myself. I just want to say, get involved. If you have any A&E sites that are interested, there's a website there. Please check it out. You can find it just by typing Green ED or Green and RChem. You can find the website, and there's some induction sessions every month. So please encourage them to take part, and feedback is always welcome on how we can improve the program. There's a lot of things involved in signing up, and I won't go through them all, but there's an induction session, there's monthly catch-ups. The catch-ups were actually really beneficial. It just brought people together, which is really nice. People can share good practice, just like we were hearing from Rachel, actually. Actually, we have a group now that's very active on CSH, so it's complemented the work that they're doing very well. Please do check it out, and the contact is up there. You can find the Green ED email if you have any other questions or want to learn more. And just to say as well that we think this framework approach potentially could be applied to other specialist areas as well. And actually we see it in other specialist areas as well. I know Green Surgery have been working on a checklist, and we've been in touch with some other the specialty areas that are looking at trying to standardize the approach towards sustainability in their environments. And I will stop there.
Thank you very much.